Have you ever sat quietly looking at your hands, where the veins now stand out, and the wrinkles trace the story of passing years, and suddenly wondered, when did I start to grow old? Is it when our hair turns gray, or when we are no longer as quick and strong as before? Or maybe it is when we finally realize that time is not something we can hold on to, but a silent companion that walks beside us all our lives. I believe that at some point, each of us has had that moment, a quiet pause when we look back on the road we have traveled and our hearts grow heavy. We stop chasing distant dreams, stop fearing that we might miss something, and instead we begin to wish for peaceful afternoons, a warm cup of tea, and the laughter of loved ones still echoing nearby. Some people say, growing old is a kind of loss, but I see it differently. Growing old is when life gives us a gift, the gift of understanding, of gratitude, and of love that runs deeper than ever before. If you have ever felt that mix of sadness and thankfulness, then today's story might touch your heart. So come, sit with me for a while, and let us slowly turn the pages of our memories together to see that growing old can be beautiful, gentle, and precious, like a sunset at the end of a long day. And if something in this story reminds you of your own memories, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your story with me. Because sometimes those small moments of sharing remind us that we are never truly alone. I still remember one spring morning, the day I turned 65. Sunlight slipped through the window and touched my steaming cup of coffee. I looked around the house, the same house that once echoed with children's laughter and running feet. Now it was just me and the slow ticking of the clock. My daughter had her own family in another city. My son was busy with work, visiting only once in a while. I sat there staring at an old photo on the shelf, a picture of my husband and me when we were young, two bright faces standing in a field of green grass. Back then, we never thought about getting old. Youth makes us believe that time is endless, that we still have so many chances to say, I love you, to start over, to say, I'm sorry. Until one morning I woke up and he was gone. The day my husband passed away, I thought I would never be able to stand again. The house that once felt warm suddenly became unbearably cold. I missed every little thing, the way he made tea, his soft cough in the mornings, even the way he mumbled while watching the news. I felt lost, wandering through a world that no longer felt familiar. For months, I did not smile. Everything around me reminded me that time waits for no one. I used to be angry at it, angry that it had taken away the person I loved most, angry that I was no longer the same. Then one afternoon, I went to the backyard, to the place where he used to plant lavender. I sat down, touched the dry stems, and cried. For the first time in months, I cried until I was exhausted. When I finally looked up, the sun had already slipped behind the trees, painting the sky a soft orange. And in that moment, I realized something. Even though he was gone, the flowers still bloomed, the wind still blew, and life, painful as it was, still went on. That day, I began to understand. Some losses never fully heal, but we can learn to live with them, just as the sun keeps rising after every long night. Since then, I have learned to slow down. I start each morning with a cup of tea and a few lines in my journal. I write about small things, a new flower in the garden, the smell of slightly burnt toast, the laughter of my granddaughter over the phone. At first, those things seemed insignificant, but little by little, they warmed my heart again. I realized that there are simple joys that youth never notices, because we are always in a hurry. I joined a yoga class for seniors and later a book club at the nearby church. There I met many people like me, people who had lost something but still chose to smile. One lady, Helen, 78 years old, once told me, "Getting old is not the scary part. The scary part is when we stop loving life." I have never forgotten her words. There was a time when my daughter brought the grandchildren over to visit. The youngest one ran all around the garden, laughing out loud. I stood there watching him, and suddenly a strange wave of gratitude filled my heart. I thought to myself, maybe happiness at this age is no longer about traveling far or achieving something great. Maybe it is simply about seeing the ones we love safe and sound, and hearing laughter echo again in a house that used to be so quiet. When it was time for them to leave, my little grandson hugged me tightly and said, "Grandma, I love coming to your house. It feels so peaceful here." I smiled. Perhaps that is the most beautiful gift of growing old, when your peace becomes a place others want to come home to. Since then, I have not been afraid of time anymore. Every morning I look into the mirror, see the wrinkles around my eyes, and smile. Each wrinkle is a memory, a mark of every time I have loved, lost, and truly lived. Time did not take away my youth. It simply carved into me the stories of everything I have been through. And instead of fearing that, I have learned to be thankful for it. Then I came to understand, growing old is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that life writes in calmer ink. It took me many years to realize that. When I was young, I used to think happiness meant perfection, being healthy, having loved ones nearby, and looking forward to endless possibilities. But time, in its quiet wisdom, teaches us that happiness is not in what we hold on to, but in what we learn to accept. One morning I went outside to water the flowers. The watering can slip from my hand and shattered into pieces. Before, I probably would have been upset, complained, and rushed to clean it up. But that day I just stood still, watching the shards glisten under the sunlight. And I realized my life is a lot like that watering can. It has cracks, it has losses, but it still reflects the light in its own way. Maybe those cracks are what make us love more deeply and appreciate what remains. I remember once an old friend came to visit. She asked, "Don't you ever feel lonely living by yourself?" I smiled and said, "No, I am not lonely. I am just quiet." Because some kinds of silence are not empty. They are peaceful. I once raced against life, against time, against my own endless ambitions. But as the years went by, I realized there was never really a race at all. It was only an illusion my mind created. Once I stopped running, I began to see that life had always been enough. Sometimes in the late afternoon, I sit by the window, watching the sunlight fade from the porch, and feel an incredible lightness in my heart. I no longer miss my younger years, because if time has taken away my quick steps, it has also given me eyes that see deeper, a heart that loves wider, and a soul that listens better. I have discovered that there is a quiet beauty in slowness. When you stop rushing, you finally hear the sound of leaves falling, smell the first rain of the season, and notice the rhythm of your own breath. I have come to believe that old age is the time when we finally learn to live truthfully with ourselves. We no longer need to be strong to prove something, nor pretend to be cheerful to please others. We are allowed to be tired, to be still, to sit in silence for an entire day without any reason. And strangely enough, in that stillness, we find a kind of happiness that youth could never give us, the happiness of being complete within ourselves. I realize that life does not need to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet morning, a soft song, a warm cup of tea, and a peaceful heart, and that is enough. That is when I truly understood. Growing old is not about fading away, it is about awakening. Awakening to the true value of every moment, every relationship, every breath. Awakening to the truth that what matters most is not how long we live, but how deeply we live. When you look closely, life is like a calm lake. In our youth, we stir it up with dreams, worries, and our desire to be better than others. The surface ripples and everything reflected becomes distorted. But as we grow older, as we stop struggling and stop trying to control everything, the lake becomes still again. And in that stillness, we finally see our true reflection. Peace, I have learned, is not when life has no storms, but when we no longer let the storms carry us away. I often think that people are like the seasons. In spring, we bloom with excitement and energy. In summer, we are busy, driven, and full of plans. In autumn, we slow down, look around, and smile. And when winter comes, when everything seems to fall asleep, that is when we learn the art of living slowly and deeply. I used to fear winter, to fear its silence, but now I see that its quietness is a gift. In silence, we can finally hear our own hearts and the whispers of all the things we once ignored. Some people say, life is a series of losses. I do not completely agree. I think life is a series of exchanges. When we let go of one thing, we make room for another. When we lose our youth, we gain wisdom. When we move away from noise, we find peace. When we stop searching for happiness outside, we begin to discover it within. And when we accept that everything has limits, that is when we finally feel free. I like to think of old age as an autumn afternoon. The sunlight is no longer blazing, but it is warm and tender. The yard is covered in fallen leaves, yet even the smallest breeze feels poetic. Some days I sit on the porch, watching the sunset cover my little garden. I do not need to say anything or do anything. Just sit there, listen to the wind, and watch the clouds drift by. That is when I realize that peace does not come from grand things, but from the ability to cherish the ordinary. The world still spins fast. Cars rushing by, phones buzzing, work piling up, news changing every minute. But we do not have to spin with it. Old age gives us the right to slow down, to live at our own pace. We no longer have to prove anything. We do not need to compete or to keep up. We just need to breathe, slowly, deeply, and that is enough. I have learned to begin each day with gratitude, grateful that I can still wake up, still see the light, still hear the birds outside my window, grateful that there are still people who call me by the names Mom, Grandma, or simply friend. One morning I woke up early, made a cup of tea, and stepped outside. The air was cool and damp with morning dew, and the sound of birds filled the trees. I stood there for a long time, feeling as if the whole world was breathing with me. When you live slowly enough, you begin to see that the simplest things are the real miracles. Every breath is a gift. Every smile, every glance is a blessing. And once you realize that, fear disappears. You no longer fear time or sickness or loss, because you finally understand that everything has its purpose and everything is unfolding just as it should. True peace, I think, does not come from how much we have, but from how little we need to feel content. I do not need much anymore, just a small house, a garden, a few loved ones, and a heart without resentment. I have learned that when your heart is at peace, life becomes peaceful too. Whether it rains or shines, whether you have or lose, you can still smile because you know that everything happening now is part of a perfect painting called life. In the end, I realized that growing old is not about losing anything. It is about coming home. Coming home to yourself, to the simple things that were once forgotten in the rush of younger years. When we are young, we think we have to go far to find the meaning of life. But after walking long enough, we finally understand that the meaning has always been right where we stand. In every meal shared, in every embrace, in every quiet afternoon spent watching the rain fall. Now I am no longer afraid of time. I look at the wrinkles on my face as if they were a small map, tracing the journey I have lived, the joys, the losses, the moments I stood back up, and the times I loved deeply. Each wrinkle is a chapter of my life. Each strand of gray hair is a memory. And every new day is a gift that life quietly sends my way. I think that peaceful aging means learning to smile at time instead of running from it. It is when we can accept everything that is past with gratitude and look toward the future with calm eyes. It is when we understand that we do not need to be perfect. We just need to be genuine. We do not need to be strong all the time. We only need to keep believing in the beauty of life. If one day you find yourself sitting by the window, listening to the wind move gently through the trees and feel a strange peace inside you. Know that this is the true gift of growing old, a gift not wrapped in paper, not glittering like diamonds, but far more delicate and precious, the gift of inner peace. Because in the end, we do not need to be perfect to be at peace. We only need to learn to love ourselves and to forgive what cannot be changed. When the heart is at peace, everything else naturally follows. And perhaps that is the most beautiful gift life could ever give us, the gift of growing old gracefully and peacefully.